Perseverance.
Stubborn.
Tenacious.
A reader.
Driven.
Resilience.
Very social.
Very independent.
Hard worker.
Felt like women could do anything.
Very education-minded.
The most important thing was she loved her family.
My name's Marjorie Stapelman, and I'm the third daughter of Lester and Marjorie Stapelman.
Hi there, I am Lois Wood. I am the fifth of 6 children. My mother was a remarkable lady.
My name is Janelle Ahern, and Marjorie Stapelman was my mother. I am the last of 6 kids that she had.
My mother was born on March 20th in 1922.
She was a twin. She was the oldest by, I think, 15 minutes of her brother, and she liked to hold that over him. Throughout their life, she would always remind him that she was the oldest.
She had 3 brothers already, a half-brother and 2 brothers that were already there. And when she was born, she, of course, was a twin, and she came with a brother. They were quite pleased to have a girl. But then 2 days later, as her mother held them in her arms, she died.
She was sitting up in bed holding a twin in each arm when the blood clot hit her. And her father was on one side and caught one of the twins, and her brother Harold was on the other side and caught the other.
She was given to her aunt, her mother's sister, to raise, and she lived with her for, I think, until she was about 11 years old. She was just 16. She would have just been like maybe a junior in high school. She, for some reason, said she was dropping out of school, and the seminary teacher convinced her. She went with her friend and they talked to him.
They said, really, are you going to let that teacher dictate what you do with your life?
He convinced her that she should go back to school. And so she went back to school to sign back up.
The principal told her she was never going to amount to anything. And she said, out of pure stubbornness, she thought, I will show him, and quit school and never went back. She was going to show him she could do it without going to school. But Mother was very intelligent, read a lot, and basically taught herself a lot.
She was a voracious reader. She had a vocabulary that nobody would have expected that she had not ever gotten through high school.
Interesting that because she dropped out of school, it was never a question in our family for us children. When we were growing up, there was never any question that we would finish school.
Doris wanted to go to church, and Doris is my oldest sister.
And Aunt Doris came back and said, I kind of like the Mormon church the best. And then Mom was kind of like, I don't feel like I should just send her to church. And so she told my dad, who worked, 6 days a week back then, I'm going to start going to church with Doris. You went to Sunday school in the mornings, and then, and it was an hour and a half, and then you came home, and then you went back for sacrament meeting later. And my dad was like, well, when am I going to see you? And Grandma said, I guess you could go to church with us.
And then when they moved to Hayburn, she said the people there were just so friendly. They just fellowshipped my dad, who was not a member before that, into going to church. When I was, I believe, 3, we had a brand new car and went to Idaho Falls, and we're all sealed together. On the way back, we had a wreck, and I cried because it ruined our new car. I should have just been glad we were all right.
And so she started going to church and was very active and participated all through her life. It was a very important thing to her.
Probably my first memory is her helping me learn to read and write out there in that little house. And Mother would go out there to do laundry, and we had a little school desk out there. And I remember I would sit and write my alphabet and read papers and books, and she said I could read and write before I ever went to school.
When I was 5 years old, I broke my leg. My dad built me a pair of crutches out of shovel handles. And when it came off, I wouldn't walk. I'd been running around on it for 2 weeks or more, without the crutches and whatnot. But then when they took the cast off, I wouldn't walk. Tried to bribe me. What could she do or give me that would make me walk? And I wanted to go see one of my aunts. Took me over to her house. And I remember that, she was trying to do anything she could to help me.
I was the miniature bride for one of them. So they had said to me over and over, when you get to the stairs, let go of Bart's hand and pull your dress up so you can walk up the stairs. I mean, she had drilled that into me, and I can seriously still hear that and see that in my mind. And we're practicing, okay, now when you get here, let go of Bart's hand, lift up your dress so you can get up the stairs, and she kept telling me that, and we practiced, and right before the wedding. Remember this, we get up to the stairs. I just stand there and wait, and finally, I don't even remember who it was. Somebody sitting at the very front, some family member came up, picked up my dress for me so I could go up the stairs.
When I started high school, it was different, and we'd all go out to the high school and register. You all went out one morning, all the kids in your grade, and try and sign up, and I was scared to go, and all my friends' mothers were going. And Mom was in the middle of canning peaches. I mean, she was already in the middle of canning peaches that morning. And I was about ready to have a nervous breakdown because I was going to have to go out there and do this by myself. She stopped what she was doing. And went with me that morning.
I don't know how old I was when she started to teach me how to do handwork. Crocheting, a little bit of knitting, some embroidery. She just was serving people all the time, loving people all the time.
When we moved to Emerson, Dad was going to farm, and Mother was a very hard worker. She would help with farming. They were working toward being on their own.
And when we moved out here, I remember the people before us had sheep. And I remember it was such a job because they had sheep pens everywhere. And we tore down all those corrals.
I do remember we didn't have indoor plumbing there, and so that was an awesome thing when we moved to Emerson. We had an inside bathroom. To me, that was a really good move. I liked it. We had a bigger house. We had a bathroom. We had that big yard. I loved that we moved.
I remember my parents wanted to build a new house, but I can remember my dad saying he went to FHA to borrow money, and FHA told him that house was plenty good for a farmer. And I can remember my parents being very upset. That was why we moved the house. We needed more room, and they wouldn't let them build a new house or give them a loan for it.
They brought in huge logs, more like telephone poles. I mean, they were really long, but they were much bigger than a telephone pole. And they literally jacked the house up off of the foundation and literally rolled it out. And, they had to be careful because there was that beautiful maple tree in the front yard. And so they were able to roll that out and just sneak past right out onto the front of the yard. And then they took out the foundation, dug the rest of the basement, and poured that.
I mean, it was quite the ordeal. We lived in the camper that summer. And so we cooked in the camper, we ate lunch in the camper, dinner, we played games, Mother read us books, because we had nothing else to do. And my favorite memory of that summer was that Mother read us Where the Red Fern Grows at night. And I can remember we would beg her, just read one more chapter. That's probably my favorite memory.
Grandma read us Where the Red Fern Grows that summer. When it was starting to get to the end, I was worried about the dogs. And so one day I snuck out there and got the book and finished reading it so that I'd know what was going to happen. Of course, I cried then. I still cried when Grandma read it. It's the end of it. She was a good parent, like I say, considering where she came from, the parents that she had growing up. It's amazing to me what kind of a parent she was. She was fair. She was strict. She didn't let us dawdle around. We worked hard, but she worked with us.
She taught me to crochet, taught me to embroidery, all the things I do that people say, oh, you're so talented. Well, Mother taught me all those things. So I'd say we had a pretty good relationship other than when I was a teenager. She taught us to work. You were always working. But it really pays off, because when I went to work and had to work, people could not believe how I worked. I mean, that I got more compliments on how hard I worked than anything else. But that's one of the biggest things Mother taught me. And to read. I would say that's another very important thing she taught all of us, because all of us were readers. And she liked to learn, and I think she instilled that in all of us.
She was a person who taught us to give. I would call her a first responder, because the minute she heard somebody was down or out or needed help, she was there. And so she taught that to us. That's something that the family throughout does. I think in all of her children's families on down, they give to people, they help.
I don't know how to explain how lucky I feel to have my parents. It's hard for parents to overcome things they suffered as a child. My mother did not have a good childhood. And I always admire that she overcame how she was treated to treat us kids way better. Now, looking back, one of the biggest things I admire about her is that she overcame that and was so loving as a parent.
I went to BYU and I was graduating, and Mother had been in the hospital. She had canker sores really bad all her life. And she'd been in the hospital because she couldn't eat or do anything, and she'd been in there for a week, and I was pretty sure she wasn't coming to my graduation. That day, she showed up. She was not going to miss it. She was going to be there for her family. And I think that just personifies her, is that I'll be there for my family.
I remember practicing my spelling words, and she was ironing. I would say the word and she would spell it. Then I would say, yes, that's right, or no, that's wrong. And she told me how to spell one word, and I said, no, that's wrong. And she said, no, that is right. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. She said, if I want to be right, I will be right. And that's how she was. She knew she was right most of the time and would never admit that she wasn't.
I had a whole group of friends, and they had some sort of dance. Some friends' mother took all of us, and there was like 6 or something of us. And then my mom was coming to pick us up. Well, 2 of my friends met a couple boys there, and they decided to walk uptown to the theater. As the dance got over, they're not back yet. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to tell my mom? Because her rule was, you come and you go with who you're supposed to. She gets there, and we go out, and these 2 girls are not here. And she said, where's whoever it was? I don't even remember which 2 it was. And I said, oh, their mom came and picked them up. Because I thought, I don't know what else to tell her, So she goes, okay. And we get in the car, and here come these 2 girls running up the sidewalk. Oh, we're so glad we caught you. And I am sitting there going, oh, I am so sorry you caught us. And my mom just kind of looks at me, and she doesn't say a word. They get in the car. She takes everyone home, and I am just dying. And so then she finally looks at me, and she said, why would you lie to me about that? And what did you say? And I said to her, because I knew what your rule is about coming and going with the same people, and I knew you'd be upset. And she said, not as upset as I am because you lied to me about it. And that just crushed me. I didn't get grounded or, anything like that. That was all. And so I think that attests to our relationship. That was all she had to say.
When we were little, we didn't do a lot of family trips, but maybe because we didn't. Maybe I remember the ones we did too. But when I was probably in junior high, 13, 14, we went to Nebraska. And that's where Dad was from. And we had never been back there. His family, his sister lived back there, and her and her husband would come out. And sometimes other people would come out and visit out there. But we had never been back there, and so Mother and Dad wanted to go back there. I think Mother more than Dad. She wanted to go back and see it. When it came time to go, Dad said, I don't think I can get away. I've got some stuff to do. I can't go. And Mother just said, all right. we're going without you. So he came, and then we stayed with Aunt Frida and Uncle Dick. And in August in Nebraska, it is very hot. And so we slept upstairs, and it was just like sleeping in the oven. Danny was lucky because he got to sleep outside. The night before we left, they wanted to have a family party, and everybody would come. And so they had it at their community swimming pool. But we didn't have swimming suits. And so they said, oh, they're sure the swimming pool would have some suits we could rent. Oh my gosh, we were so embarrassed to come out in those suits. We just went in that water and we never came out. But it was fun. It was fun, and we loved the people.
I only remember 2 family vacations my whole life. Every time Dad would come in and say, we have 3 or 4 days from when he would finish watering until he had to start harvesting grain. And the biggest share of the time, my mother would say, let's just stay home and pour concrete around the yard. Let's stay home and make the garden bigger. Let's stay home and always work, always work. My 2 vacations, we went to Bear Valley one year with Doris and Gary and their kids and took horses and stayed a week. And our other trip was the year Marjorie graduated from college, and we went to Yellowstone Park. I had never been there. We had a camcorder. We'd never had one before, and it was so cool. We saw this moose and its baby. Well, Marjorie and I were determined we were going to film that moose and its baby. And her and I are out there. I can't imagine my parents sitting in the car waiting for her and I, because we must have been out there for hours following this moose, walking through swamps, basically. And when we left, we could not get a hotel room anywhere we went in Yellowstone. So we drove clear into Jackson Hole, no rooms available in Jackson Hole. And the Chamber of Commerce said, some people allow us to rent out rooms in their homes. And so the mayor of Jackson Hole let us stay at their house. And here Marjorie and I are. We've been out there in muck up to here. But I do remember going to Nebraska. That wasn't considered a vacation, though. Even though I didn't call them vacations, it was family trips that were entertaining, to say the least. You know how now you have to have a car seat for everybody? We didn't back then. The first time I really remember going, I think we had a 55 or 56 Ford Fairlane. They are not big cars. And Marjorie sat between Mother and Dad because she got car sick really easy. I sat on the floor at Mother's feet, and the other kids, the other 4, were in the back seat. And Danny stood behind Dad because there wasn't room for him to sit. And so it was a bit crowded. That was the highlight of our trip to Nebraska, is when they would all play music, and it was so fun to be entertained by them. The trips to Nebraska were pretty fun.
When we would travel in the car, she always sang to us. We would go, and when we would come back and it would get long, we'd say, sing to us. And she had 2 or 3 songs that she would sing. I know one is called The Letter Edged in Black, which was a really sad song, but we loved it. And so she always sang to us.
Letter Edged in Black. I love that song. And she would sing it when we'd go on our trip. I mean, she sang old songs. That Letter Edged in Black, that was the one I always wanted her to sing.
Sunday nights were special, and we had popcorn and fudge. And she carried that tradition clear until she was a widow. And grandkids, if she knew somebody was coming for Sunday evening, she would make popcorn and fudge because that was our standard thing. We ate bread and milk for dinner on Sundays. My mom was a reader. She loved to read to the kids, and she would read all the time, and my dad would get mad at her because Grandpa only went to school to the 8th grade, and he wasn't a good reader. And so he thought that was kind of a waste of time, and he'd get after her. Get up and have them do something or whatever, but don't just sit and read, But he changed over the years. Later in life, he told her, I'm so glad that you read, because that has made our kids such better students and all that stuff because they were good readers.
Our friends were always welcome at our house. We could have a party anytime. Mother loves parties and get-togethers. So I could have friends over anytime. She wanted all of us to learn to play the piano. She pushed us to develop talents. I'm very grateful for the things she made us learn and do. Very grateful. I just couldn't have asked for better parents, really. Christmas, she always made Christmas special. And most of the time she made the things we got. If you got a doll, she had made all kinds of clothes for it. I remember one year she told me she panicked on Christmas Eve because she forgot to get things for my stocking. And so she made a little paper notebook with coupons on it. Good for a pair of gloves in January. Oh, it's one of my highlights. I still remember how cool that was. And she was panicked that she forgot to buy stuff for my stocking. Christmas caroling, I loved. Once Dad got a wagon and had a team of horses or mules, we did it for years. By then, I was home and had little kids. So we would get on that wagon and go around the 4-mile square, and we would all take things to give to all of our neighbors. And it was the highlight of Christmas Eve, really.
Everybody loved it. The kids loved it because they didn't know it was cold. And Mother loved it because all the family was together.
We'd come back to Mom and Dad's house and we'd have hot chocolate. And we'd do this like in the middle of the afternoon. We'd do this at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We'd come back and have hot chocolate. Then everyone would disperse to their own houses, and then we'd come back probably at 6 and have dinner and do our little, nativity and all of our games.
She always had fun games, passing the orange and the basketball between your knees, and lifesaver from toothpick to toothpick, things you wouldn't dare do now, And like I said, she loved a party, and she loved gathering and having her family around her.
We always acted out the nativity scene until we had so many kids. We were having bluebirds and all kinds of weird things because there were so many kids that needed a part.
I think Christmas was probably one of Mom's, I'm sure, favorite things because she could gather the family and do those kinds of things. And it was just great in her wheelhouse to make those Swedish cookies. That was her thing. But, she just really lived for any family gathering.
I think I do the things I do because I saw her do it, and I knew, and she would just say, well, it's got to be done. But I picked that up. Some things just have to be done, so you might as well just get on and do them. Like I said, she's taught me to love to read, and reading is gaining knowledge. I don't care what you read, you're gaining knowledge. And I think she instilled in all of us that desire to gain knowledge and to read and to find that out. So she taught us to sew when we were growing up, and I love to sew. It's my, it's my thing. And so I think I gained a lot of that from her because she did that a lot.
Well, teaching me how to work is definitely one of those things. How to read. I read 210 books last year, and even I was surprised at how many I read. The other thing I've really learned from her is to share, and that's probably one of my things that have been instilled. I like to share and give things to other people, whether it's quilts I've made or jam or food or whatever. And I know I learned that from her.
The girls and I have a little laugh about the fact that as we get older, we turn more into Grandma. And I think that's only a compliment to Grandma. Grandma was very stubborn, You know, it was sometimes her way or the highway. But a lot of times I found over the years that her way was the way. That, oh, yep, she was right about that. You have to be you. And Grandma was definitely her. You know, she didn't really worry about what anyone else thought. She was just, you know, her. Grandma wasn't much for the spotlight. I mean, she could be in charge, but she wasn't doing it for any appreciation or recognition. I think it's all the little stuff that she just did, and it wasn't a big deal. She just what she needed to do.
And I think sometimes we don't recognize the difficulties that she faced and how she took care of so many of them without anyone else's help.
Her love of her family. Absolutely. And I think her willingness to share everything she had with those less fortunate. And like I said, I don't think Mom and Dad were ever rich by any means, but they were always willing to share. And I credit Mother with teaching us that. And I think she deserves a lot of recognition for that.
Probably your biggest challenge is when Dad died, to go through it and to take care of everything. And she had both her knees replaced within 6 months of one another. And I think that was a real challenge to her because she was so used to being out and working and doing things that when she couldn't do those things, it was really hard on her. She went on a mission for church. And I think that was a challenge to her, to be away from her home and to be in an environment and a situation where she wasn't really totally in charge of it. And I think that was a challenge to her, but she felt like she needed to do that.
I don't think she ever really felt wanted by anyone, you know, because she was given to an aunt to raise who didn't care for her, didn't want to have to raise her, but she taught herself to sew, taught herself to cook. So I think her upbringing was quite difficult. But you really never heard her complain that much about it. I think the next big challenge probably was when Dad got cancer. How could he let this happen to my dad when he was so young? It's gonna make me cry because I think that was probably one of her biggest challenges, was to lose her husband. That she overcame. She lived 42 years by herself. And look at the legacy. She didn't give up and just say, I'm not going to go do anything. She kept busy. She took grandkids on trips. She never quit going, never quit learning, kept her garden, kept her yard up. And it was a challenge for her.
I think one of her biggest struggles obviously was her first 2 days of life, losing her mother. And so she didn't have a lot to do with her dad at the beginning when she was young, which I think has to be hard. And then when she turned like 13, Maggie just said, go live with your dad. And so she all of a sudden gets dumped with her dad, who had, I believe, a little tiny house with one bedroom. And I think Harold might have still been at home because he's only like 2.5 years older than Grandma. So I'm sure he was like 15 or something. I think Vern was there for a while. So it wasn't a really nice, easy situation. It was hard.
You know, so she didn't give up. She didn't just say, I'm old, and say, I've done my share of work. I've worked all these years. I'm going to retire. You know, I'm going to let people take care of me. She just kept right on going.
Never gave up, just kept going, endured to the end. She would tell me, I hope I can endure to the end. And she most certainly did. Even when Dad was down with cancer and really struggling, she just did everything she could for him. He had a little bell in there, and he'd ring that bell, and she'd shoot down the hallway to see what he needed. Mother was only 59, so she had a long time to think about, how am I ever going to make a living? How am I going to keep going? She had a lot more concerns than he did, but she never gave up.
She kept going, I think, even when it was a struggle. When my dad left for the Army, I think their little tar paper house they were building wasn't done, and she finished it, got it done, and I think it was maybe a 2 or 3 room house. And that is so admirable to me, that no matter what was thrown at them, she found a way, and she was fairly happy as a person.
I think one of her greatest strengths was her love of family. I don't know whether growing up she didn't feel that bond of family, but I think she wanted that. She really wanted that, and I think she's worked really hard to create that and draw her family close together and hold them close together. I mean, she was sending birthday cards until she was 100 to everybody, So I think that was one of her greatest strengths, was to build a strong family bond.
Sometimes I'm very grateful my mother passed when she did. But the longer she's gone, the more I miss her. And probably her greatest trait was how she loved her family. She just really wanted us all to be very close, to love each other, and we do.
Her love of service, her love of people, and I think that living life again, that just jumping in and not sitting back waiting for things to happen, but saying, well, this should happen, so I guess I'll do it. Was always out there willing to do whatever needed to be done.
And her willingness to share that love with everyone. That was her greatest thing, was that everybody called her Grammy. There were so many of us, and all of us loved her so much.
I think she wants to be remembered as the mother, the grandmother, the great-grandmother that cared about everybody.
Her family is her greatest legacy. For her family to be good people. She wanted them to be out working at a good job, being nice to other people around them, serving those around them, doing what they could to lighten the loads for others. She came from walking, horse and buggy, all that kind of stuff, to jet planes, to space stations, to cell phones, iPads. And I just loved that she embraced it all, that she just was so excited about new things and how they worked. She didn't always think they were better, than how they did things, because sometimes I think she thought we were all too much in a rush. And Grandma would say sometimes, why do we have to do everything faster? I appreciate so much all that knowledge that she gave me, and to see her embrace the new things and be excited about stuff that was coming up.
She was always willing to do anything new. Every little new crap that came out, she would want to try it, and talked all of us into doing it with her. And my other thing was that thirst for knowledge. I am so grateful she taught us that, because I feel like all of us are quite intelligent. Keep learning, keep reading, never quit. We all read a lot, and I know that came from Mother. She was somebody you could go to and talk about your troubles. She always listened. She always had an opinion. You may not agree with her, but she had an opinion, and she wasn't afraid to tell you what it was. The longer she's gone, the more I miss her. I consider myself extremely lucky to have the parents I had.